First, Emily, thanks for having me. Really appreciate the invite and the chance to talk about this crazy landscape we all currently live in. As you said, Arlington is we're a sort of super specialized investment banking firm. We only focus on three verticals, and beverage is a big chunk of what we do. In the space I've worked in for the past 16, 17 years, sort of fell into it by accident and grew to love the industry and the people, and have found a way to stick with it ever since. As you said, we've done the team at Arlington has done over $7 billion of alcoholic beverage deals across all of our careers, and that's covered beer, wine, spirits, non-alc, and we've done both distribution and supplier side deals. So we've got a very sort of interesting breadth and depth of experience across our team, and across also we've had some people that have operated beverage companies as well. So we've got a very unique sort of depth of experience in our team, and a broad spectrum of transactions we've done, and ways we've helped companies, whether it be operating, consulting, or advising. Today we want to talk, we're going to cover more of the specific M&A market recently, I think, in the Q&A time. But at Arlington, we try not to look at the world in too much of a siloed point of view, I would say. We try to take a step back when we can to look at the broader consumer landscape and what consumers are doing. Because obviously consumers are interacting with different segments of food, beverage, other products, and the trends in one segment often have an impact on others. So we try not to be too myopic in how we look at the space. I know today's topic is mostly around spirits, but we also want to talk about other beverage categories and the interplay there, because all of those consumer trends have an impact on what's happening with spirits, as well as other beverage alcohol and non-alcoholic categories. And two of the biggest trends we're seeing today, I would say, in the M&A, innovation, and partnership market, pre and post-COVID, are sort of themes of convergence and resilience. Convergence is the one I want to talk about first. It covers a lot of interesting dynamics where we're seeing a lot of lines blurring, whether it's between beverage alcoholic categories, geographies of products and where they come from and where they're sold, and how products get to market. The first segment we wanted to talk about was sort of the convergence between non-alcoholic and alcoholic products. There's been a lot of interesting innovation in this. I would say in the past few years, and really in the past 2 or 3 weeks alone, there's been a lot of developments that have been really fascinating to watch. Sort of the transformation of some of these companies that used to be very determined to stay sort of within their lane, whether it was beer or spirits or wine. And now they're all getting more open to doing things that they wouldn't have done 10, 15 years ago, because the consumer has moved across so many categories and they know they have to meet them there. So one of the big trends we're seeing is strategic companies either doing investments or partnerships or even acquisitions of categories that aren't usually in their wheelhouse. A few examples on this slide, Molson Coors and ABI have been very active recently in either investing in non-alcoholic brands or platforms and incubators, or doing distribution and sort of marketing partnerships with certain brands. And that's covered the gamut from energy, coffee, workout and fitness products, all sorts of other innovative things through partnerships like Molson Coors has with LA Libations. A lot of interesting activity happening there. The big beer companies especially, I think, have been especially threatened by the growth of spirits in the past 5 or 10 years, and they've sort of realized they have to get more innovative. Beer is still a very stable industry, but it's not growing the way spirits is. So they're trying to get more aggressive in terms of how they broaden their approach to the consumer. Another interesting deal, one of the more interesting ones recently, is the Topo Chico upcoming hard seltzer. Of course, this is a brand that started non-alcoholic, was acquired by another non-alcoholic company, and then now is launching, or I guess say line extending, an alcoholic version into the US, but they're not going to produce or distribute or market it in the US. They're going to go entirely through a partnership with Molson Coors. So that's a really fascinating convergence across categories and geographies for a brand that has a lot of incredible momentum already. And now they're going to see whether that momentum can translate into the alcoholic beverage space. Other things we're seeing, spirits companies investing either in more traditional non-alcoholic products, such as Pernod Ricard. I think it was just last week announced that their venture arm is investing in Liquid Death, which is a water brand with a lot of branding. So that's an interesting investment for a spirits company. Of course, Diageo has invested in Seedlip, which is a non-alcoholic brand that tastes more like an alcoholic brand. So that sort of blurs the lines in multiple ways there. And then sort of on the non-investment side, we're seeing some interesting independent companies innovate things such as what Boochcraft and Juneshine are doing in the kombucha space. I mean, historically, kombucha is either a low or no alcohol product. And now you're seeing new entrants like these two players who are taking a low alcohol product and doing a high alcohol version, and seeing a lot of early success. Another convergence we're seeing is blurring lines between different beverage alcohol categories. Obviously, Anheuser-Busch has been very active in the past few years in acquiring brands outside of beer, whether it's spirits, whether it's wine, whether it's spirits-based sort of seltzers or RTDs. There's a lot of activity from them. You've seen wine companies like Gallo that have either innovated internally into spirits products or they've acquired them, such as Drummond Robin. You also got Gallo innovating things like High Noon, which has been a huge success right out of the gate. And then you see independent companies that are innovating brands like Beatbox doing a wine-based product that drinks more like a beer occasion. Or you've got Ondo, which is a tequila-based sort of seltzer RTD product. You got Willie's Super Brew, which is another sort of innovative seltzer, kind of going in the more healthier, better for you ingredient space. And then you got Anheuser-Busch, of course, and all the other big beer companies that are innovating seltzers 1,000 different ways because they see that's where the market's headed. Another sort of emerging trend, a little more in the earlier stage for sure, but a lot of new innovations in cannabis and CBD beverages. And some of these are designed to taste or maybe simulate the effects of alcohol. Some are designed to do things that are completely different and give you a completely different kind of buzz. But there's a lot of interesting innovation in terms of what you can do, whether it's actual beverage form, like Rebel Coast or like Two Roots or Recess, or it's a product like Ripple that you put into any beverage you like, and you add the effects of THC or CBD to that product without actually fundamentally changing the beverage you're putting it in. And then we're seeing a lot of innovation, of course, north of the border in the Canadian market that will eventually get down to the US. Still a very tiny market and a very tiny share even of cannabis, but it's an interesting development to see if these products can take some of the share of the occasions where people might have used alcohol to relax or to socialize, if they're trying to find ways to replace that with a cannabis or a CBD-based product. Another huge movement, for the last really 5 or 10 years, but it's accelerated so much during COVID, is just the changing of route to market, especially through e-commerce and direct to consumer. And we've seen a lot of companies innovate on their own and have to be agile and adapting to the market and trying to move more product through e-commerce than they were before because of COVID and because of on-premise closures and tasting room and tap room closures. But we've also seen some acquisition activity. Constellation's made a couple purchases in the wine space that are focused on DTC and e-commerce. Campari has made an investment in an overseas e-commerce platform. The Wine and Spirits Wholesalers Association themselves invested a few years ago in Drizzly. They see the future of a 3-tier compliant e-commerce platform as being very intriguing. And then I think, beyond that, we're seeing a lot of suppliers, especially small and mid-sized ones in a lot of different states that took advantage of, at least temporarily, if not permanently, loosened local laws around how and when you can sell alcohol, whether it's selling a pre-mixed cocktail to go with a meal from a restaurant, or whether it's a distillery that suddenly had a temporary ability to sell products to go or extra products to go to customers they weren't allowed to before. Time will tell whether or not these new loosened regulatory schemes stay permanent. I think a lot of them will. I think some of them they're already trying to roll back. But I think once the consumer gets used to these, and I think once the market sort of realizes that, giving these restaurants and distilleries and different establishments, a few more freedoms, hasn't necessarily broken apart the 3-tier system. I think there should be some more openness to keeping those new rules in place. Geography is another big one. We're seeing a lot of convergence and blurred lines. Obviously the world has become much more global in the past few decades, certainly a little less now during COVID, but I don't think that macro trend is necessarily going to change. I think people still like to experience other cultures and other products, and you've seen a lot of M&A activity across multiple beverage and beverage alcohol sectors covering this. Topo Chico was a big move. We were involved in this transaction here, so it's a little selfish to include it, but we were involved in the transaction to help sell New Belgium to Lion Kieran. That was their biggest move to date in the US. You've seen Anheuser-Busch invest in multiple brands across other countries. Patagonia is one we highlight here, but they've done a lot of investment in a lot of different continents. You've seen companies like Sazerac make significant investments in distilleries in India. Just seeing the growth that's already coming and is to come in that market. There's a lot of geographic convergence that's already happened. And I think if you look at the way the landscape of the supplier world across all beverage categories has consolidated, I think you're going to see more and more consolidation that goes cross-border. And the second big trend we wanted to talk about today was resilience. I think, the M&A market certainly was quiet after the first wave of COVID really hit back in March, but we're really seeing it start to pick up in the past, I would say 4 to 6 weeks. And the biggest trends we're seeing beyond convergence and beyond the interest in acquirers looking at all these different categories that sort of blur lines and blur what a consumer thinks a product might be or could be, is we're seeing that acquirers are focused on brands and businesses that have shown resilience through COVID, and really especially on brands and businesses that have thrived during COVID. And it's hard to say anyone's really thrived. There's been challenges, and there's been unfortunate effects for all beverage alcohol businesses during COVID, and a terrible loss of not only activity but employment in the on-premise sector. But we have seen an increase in activity in companies, whether it's financial or strategic, that want to invest or acquire beverage alcohol brands that have shown a lot of resilience during this, that have either were already well positioned for direct consumer and e-commerce or have pivoted to that. Ones that were more focused on off-premise retail than on, or again, have pivoted to that. Ones that had a delivery capability or can use the delivery capability of someone else's third-party system, have been all really important. I think in certain segments, certainly RTD cocktails, seltzers, canning capacity has been huge, and in short supply for everyone. And I think, companies that have internal canning capacity and, more important, have the ability to get cans across all sectors are going to be very, very important for acquirers and investors to get their hands around. I think having a good supply chain has been key. Certainly, cans are involved in that, but also other key ingredients and raw materials. In an uncertain world where you're not sure if there's going to be more COVID closures either in this country or other countries, when you're suddenly not able to get the supplies you need, having an efficient supply chain and having enough inventory has been really critical. I think, I mentioned it before, but the ability to pivot has been super important. So having really good management teams that are able to think on their feet and able to see a step or two ahead and understand what they might need to do to change their business model has been really key for the interest we're seeing in some of our clients and some of the interest we're seeing across the industry. And then I think, for companies that have a significant on-premise presence, whether it's through their own channels or sometimes through others, but especially with the on-premise, the ability to quickly track and mitigate if they have any issues with employees having positive tests, and isolating that and dealing with it and sanitizing and making sure the issue doesn't spread has been also critical. And we've had several clients and several industry friends we know that have had to learn quickly how to do this and how to create better systems for tracking and isolating. But unfortunately, we all hope that I think there's going to be fewer issues and fewer closures in the future. But if they do come back, you're going to need to have the ability to quickly shut down and quickly reopen.